Oh, what a delight it was to see Rhaenyra Targaryen finally sitting on the Iron Throne. And Emma Darcy? Holy cow. Give them all the awards already, because in this moment, the Queen, basking in a bittersweet victory that cost her sons, forced to spend her days away from her own home and left repeatedly questioned by her supporters. She's risen, she's won, and the realm got Rhaenyra Targaryen as they were promised. Now, as Rhaenyra fans, including me, want to celebrate this, we also know that her win is as unstable as a house of cards. I'm sure my book nerds have already gotten the drift of this video, but let me tell you this. No matter how many times we read about Rhaenyra's fate, every time the heart wants a different outcome. And now with the show soaking her in all the glory she deserved, it'll be even more difficult to accept the end. For those who have gone into the show blind, spoiler alert, I'll be spelling exactly what happens to Rhaenyra after she wears the crown. So who was Rhaenyra in the books? She was the firstborn child of King Viserys Targaryen I and Queen Aemma of House Arryn. And she also happened to be the couple's only living child before Viserys married Alicent. Known as the Realm's Delight, Rhaenyra inherited the Valyrian looks and wore her silver gold hair in a long braid like Queen Visenya Targaryen. She was beautiful for sure, and even Daemon declared her to be the most beautiful maiden in all the Seven Kingdoms when she was 14. But what always intrigued me about her was her nature. Rhaenyra was bold and stubborn. She was equally proud of her lineage and has been described as having a certain petulance to her small mouth. Martin was giving us a rebellious boss woman, and of course we started cheering for her. Rhaenyra dressed mostly in purple and maroon velvets with gold Mirish lace in intricate patterns. She drowned herself in luxury, and her bodice often glowed with diamonds and pearls, and she happened to turn the rings on her fingers whenever she was anxious. However, she was pretty short-tempered and held grudges, and Alicent was the first on her list of hated people. Screams Targaryen, right? Rhaenyra became a dragon rider by age 7 and claimed Syrax at age 8, and she became her father's cupbearer, after which Viserys was seldom seen without her. By 105 AC, when Viserys did not have any living male heirs to succeed him, he proclaimed Rhaenyra as his heir and had the lords and landed knights present at court to swear fealty to her. She was also named the Princess of Dragonstone, and these lords were supposed to defend her rights of succession. Now, Rhaenyra and Daemon had a long-standing, controversial romantic relationship, and despite both being married to different people, the two ultimately chose to get married without Viserys' approval after Rhaenyra's husband, Sir Laenor Velaryon, was apparently killed by his companion, Carl Corey, and Daemon's second wife, Elena Velaryon, died following childbirth. The two didn't even wait 6 months after their respective spouses' deaths before getting together, and this raised a whole lot of eyebrows. The two made their home on the island fortress of Dragonstone, as Rhaenyra had already taken possession of Dragonstone when she was 16 in 113 AC. By the end of their first year of marriage in 120 AC, the couple welcomed the birth of their first son, Prince Aegon the Younger, and another son, Viserys, in 122 AC. Viserys took some time to reconcile with Daemon and Rhaenyra, but he ultimately did so, and now Rhaenyra and Daemon were living with their children from previous marriages as well, named Jacaerys Velaryon, Lucerys Velaryon, Joffrey Velaryon, and Daemon and Laena's twins, Rhaena and Baela Targaryen. Despite the prominent rivalry between the Targaryens and the Hightowers, which marked the rise of the opposing factions, the Blacks and the Greens, Lucerys Velaryon was regarded as the heir to Driftmark, while her elder son, Jacaerys, was named her heir to Dragonstone. However, after the death of King Viserys Targaryen I, the infamous civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons began because the Green Council, led by Viserys' hand Otto Hightower and Lord Commander of the Kingsguard Sir Criston Cole, decided to take matters into its own hands. They kept Viserys' death hidden from Rhaenyra and Daemon, who were expecting their third child together on Dragonstone, and crowned Alicent's son, Aegon Targaryen II, as king. When the news reached Rhaenyra, she was crestfallen and furious, and gave birth to a stillborn daughter named Visenya, whose death she blamed on the Greens. Daemon, however, stood beside her and supported her claim to the throne, and managed to raise forces for her. The realm soon got divided into two parties, one that supported Aegon II, whom the Blacks called Aegon the Usurper, and another that supported their rightful queen, Rhaenyra. In the meantime, Daemon crowned her on Dragonstone as queen with a crown that once belonged to his grandfather, King Jaehaerys Targaryen I. Daemon declared himself protector of the realm. However, when the news of Rhaenyra's coronation reached King Aegon II, he demanded the heads of Daemon and Rhaenyra. but Grand Maester Orwell convinced him to allow peace terms to be offered. She was thus offered conditions that would let her and her descendants remain rulers of Dragonstone if she renounced her claim to the throne. But obviously, Rhaenyra refused. That marked the start of the Dance of Dragons. And when the war claimed the lives of both Rhaenyra's sons, Jacaerys and Lucerys, she was not ready to wait and watch anymore. On the other hand, the conflict also claimed the life of Aegon II's son, Prince Jaehaerys, and both parties were now fuming and prepared to make the final strike. When Aemond, who was now the Prince Regent after Aegon II got severely injured in the fight against Rhaenys on her dragon melees, flew to Harrenhal to confront Daemon, Daemon had already left. With the majority of the Green's forces divided towards Harrenhal and Aegon secretly removed from the capital, Rhaena flew on her dragon Syrax, accompanied by Daemon on Caraxes, and without much struggle managed to claim the throne. Fearing her dragon power, Rhaenyra's political rivals started fleeing or were imprisoned, including Alicent Hightower, Queen Helena, Master of Laws Jasper Wilde, and Grand Maester Orwell. However, Otto Hightower was publicly executed on Rhaenyra's command. During this time, Sir Larys Strong and Aegon had smuggled out, disguised as one of the small folk, and placed aboard a fishing boat, but his toddler son, Prince Maelor Targaryen, later died in a brutal event after an angry mob found him at Bitterbridge while he was trying to escape with Sir Rickard Thorne. Aegon eventually arrived on Dragonstone, where he managed to convince several of the Blacks to help him take the island. During this time, Aegon II on Sunfire fought Princess Baela on her dragon Moondancer, and when the dragons fell during the melee, Aegon leapt from Sunfire's back and broke both of his legs. He stayed in pain for the rest of his life, but refused to take Milk of the Poppy, having experienced its effects during his recovery after the battle at Rook's Rest. When Rhaenyra finally claimed King's Landing, she insisted on claiming her father's seat, and she climbed the Iron Throne and began accepting pleas for forgiveness and allegiance from those in the Red Keep. According to the account of Septon Eustace, who favored Aegon Targaryen II, although Rhaena was wearing armor, the throne left multiple cuts on her legs and left hand. When her blood dripped down, many took it as a sign that the throne had rejected her. However, this account is disputed, and Rhaenyra had already grown stout after her pregnancies, rather than because of any sudden gluttony during her reign. But Rhaenyra did not consider her victory to be safe until she got Aegon's head and issued decrees offering both wealth and titles for its capture. As for Aemond, she declared him an outlaw and actually sent Daemon and Dragonseed, the 17-year-old Nettles who managed to claim the wild dragon Sheepstealer, to find Aemond and kill it. Rhaenyra was initially welcomed by the commoners of King's Landing because they didn't really like Aegon Targaryen II or his brother Aemond. But even with all of this approval and Aemond and Aegon missing, she had another active threat, Prince Daeron Targaryen, aka Daeron the Daring. He was the youngest son of Alicent Hightower and King Viserys Targaryen I, and when Rhaenyra seized King's Landing, he was with Lord Ormond Hightower's army. He had spent most of his life in Old Town, away from the Red Keep, and marched along with Ormond's army from Old Town. During the Battle of the Honeywine, the Hightower army was caught between two enemies. Lord Thaddeus Rowan and Tom Flowers, the bastard of Bitterbridge, came from the northeast with a large number of mounted knights. Moreover, Lord Alan Tarley, Sir Alan Beesbury, and Lord Owen Costain were all loyal to the Blacks, joined their smaller forces together and attacked the Hightowers from behind, thus cutting off their retreat south to Old Town. Ormond's forces were beginning to crumble when a huge shadow appeared in the sky, and there he was, Prince Daeron on his dragon Tessarion. It was due to his timely arrival that the Hightower army was saved, and he got that moniker. Understandably, Daeron became one of the biggest threats to Rhaenyra, and she had to get rid of him to secure her claim on the throne. Things, however, were becoming difficult for her on all fronts, and even the royal treasury, which was full of gold during Viserys' time, was now empty, because Sir Tywin Lannister had divided the crown's gold into 4 parts. One part was sent to the Iron Bank of Braavos, another to Castle Rock, a third to Old Town, and the remaining wealth was used by the Green for bribes, gifts, and sellswords. In desperate need of money, Rhaenyra asked her new master of coin, Lord Bartimaeus Celtigar, to place new taxes on the small folk, which increased day by day. That's when her subjects slowly started turning against her, and even went so far as to name her King Maegor with Teats, where the reference was to Maegor the Cruel. On the other hand, the Hightower army was moving from the Reach towards King's Landing, and Daeron would scout ahead of them while flying on Tessarion. Various lords, including those of House Oakhart and House Rowan, and the Shield Islands, submitted to the Greens to avoid Tessarion's dragonfire. When the news of their progress reached the Queen, she sent the 2 dragon seeds, Sir Hugh Hammer on Vermithor and Sir Ulf White on Silverwing, to Tumbleton, which was the seat of House Footley and the last of Rhaenyra's strongholds between Ormond's advancing army and King's Landing. The Blacks also got huge numbers of forces from House Merryweather of Longtable, House Castwell of Bitterbridge, Sir Pate of Longleaf, Red Rob Rivers, Sir Garibald Grey, and the Winter Wolves of Lord Roderick Dustin. Other defenders from the Blackwater Rush included Sir Garrick Hall, Sir Roger Corn, Mosslander of Yore, Sir Merrill the Bold, and Lord Owain Burney, who also joined them to defend the town of Tumbleton. Yet the Green forces outnumbered the Blacks, and some of them even infiltrated the town as refugees. Moreover, Roger Corn and Owain Burney were actually secretly loyal to Aegon Targaryen II. The Blacks were struggling to stay afloat against Ormond's army, and on top of that, Daeron appeared on Tessarion. However, that didn't instantly shake the defenders because Tessarion was smaller than Vermithor and Silverwing, and when they entered the fight, the Blacks thought they would easily defeat the Hightowers. However, Sir Hugh Hammer and Sir Ulf White turned out to be the two betrayers who turned against the Blacks and joined the Greens, and actually had Vermithor and Silverwing burn Tumbleton. I always had a goddamn feeling they were not good news, especially Ulf. Ultimately, Sir Roger Corn's men opened the gates of Tumbleton to the Greens, and Sir Merrill the Bold was betrayed by Lord Owain Burney inside the town's castle. Although Lord Footley's men yielded, they were still captured and beheaded by the Greens. Tumbleton was shattered after the battle, and women were violated. Lord Ormond Hightower died, and Daeron tried to keep the men under control, but in vain. When the news of the Blacks' defeat and the two betrayers reached Queen Rhaenyra, she grew paranoid and began doubting the other dragon seeds, Adam of Hull and Nettles, and declared them traitors. However, Lord Corlys had already declared Adam to be his heir, alerted him, and he flew away on sea smoke. This led to Corlys being arrested and caused House Valerian's fleet to abandon Rhaenyra's side. Nettles, on the other hand, was allowed to escape by Daemon on her dragon sheepstealer because, according to some accounts, he was in love with her. Moreover, Lord Manfred Mooten also knew that King Viserys I or Jaehaerys I would never have asked for something as brutal as Nettles' head, and also feared that killing her would provoke Daemon into killing them. However, not following the Queen's orders would make him a traitor, and thus he decided to shift his allegiance to Aegon II after Nettles and Daemon left his roof. It's said that when Alicent heard about the Battle of Tumbleton, she stated, "All they have sowed, now they shall reap." Rhaenyra was clearly losing her footing, and in the middle of all this, Rhaenyra Targaryen was believed to have taken her own life. Since she was loved by the small folk, her death caused a riot in King's Landing, and many claimed she was killed on Rhaenyra's command. The capital was in total chaos. Many people tried to flee King's Landing, but Rhaenyra ordered the Goldcloaks to seal the gates. However, people turned against her in numbers, and an uprising soon escalated to a point where the Dragon Pit was stormed. Her son, Joffrey Valerian, tried to mount his mother's dragon Syrax to reach the Dragon Pit to save his own dragon, Tyraxus, and he was killed when Syrax threw him off during the flight. Now, the scene at Tumbleton was not pretty either. The Green Army started dwindling as men left with their loot, and even when Daeron urged Ulf and Hugh to help him move forward towards King's Landing, they refused. Gradually, the Greens fell into a state of inaction, and Hugh had the audacity to declare his ambition to become king, while Ulf demanded Highgarden. Even when the nobles encouraged the Dragon Seeds to lead the Greens after hearing of the unrest in King's Landing, they remained stubborn and eventually faced the wrath of Adam of Hull, who decided to defend his honor by retaking Tumbleton from Hugh and Ulf. Over time, Adam managed to raise a loyal army and fought in the Second Battle of Tumbleton, where his dragon Seasmoke went up against Hugh's Vermithor and Daeron's Tessarion. All three dragons died in the battle, and Daeron was also dead, but how he died remained a mystery. Although Adam's attack destroyed the Green Host as an effective fighting force, Rhaenyra had already fled King's Landing because she was now desperate to make Aegon II pay after losing all three children from her first marriage. As she traveled past Stokeworth, Rosby, and Duskendale, she grew increasingly scared and tired and was even forced to sell her crown to buy passage. She used the money to secure passage on a Bravossi merchant ship, the Violin, and finally reached Dragonstone. When she finally reached Dragonstone, unaware of Aegon Targaryen II's coup, she was met with betrayal from Sir Alfred Broom, whose men slaughtered the remainder of her Queen's Guard. In the end, when she met Aegon, her first words were, "Dear brother, I had hoped you were dead." But things only got worse for her when Aegon ordered his dragon Sunfire to kill and eat Rhaenyra in front of her child, Prince Aegon the Younger. To directly quote from Fire and Blood, Sunfire, it is said, did not seem at first to take any interest in the offering, until Broom pricked the queen's breast with his dagger. The smell of blood roused the dragon, who sniffed at her grace and then bathed her in a blast of flame, so suddenly that Sir Alfred's cloak caught fire as he leapt away. Rhaenyra Targaryen had time to raise her head toward the sky and shriek out one last curse upon her half-brother, before Sunfire's jaws closed around her, tearing off her arm and shoulder. The dragon is said to have devoured the queen in 6 bites, leaving only part of her left leg. The sight was so horrifying that Rhaenyra's lady-in-waiting, Ellen de Massey, reportedly gouged out her own eyes, and Aegon the Younger was so shocked that he was unable to move. And that's how Rhaenyra Targaryen's reign came to an end, and she came to be known as the Half-Year Queen. Alright guys, I'll have to bid goodbye on a solemn note, because I don't think Rhaenyra deserves an end as disgraceful and tragic as this. Now, although the show is taking some liberties, the crux of these events may remain similar, and Rhaenyra is still expected to die in the end. But we have to wait and watch to see exactly how they pull it off. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so that when a new House of the Dragon video drops, you get that notification. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, and as always, stay marvelous.